The rich and the poor have always lived in different worlds and different lives. The rich have always been and will be in power, and the poor will be forced to obey them, accepting the living conditions that the rich create for them. I think that in our time, given the informational level of modern man, most people understand perfectly well that the power of the rich is not some kind of oligarchy, capitalism or anything else. It is a completely natural phenomenon, in absolutely any country, at all times. The rich have power because they have strength in the form of money, in the form of authority, in the form of unity and organization, and in the form of intelligence, because whatever you say, the rich are often smarter, more flexible, more cunning and more resourceful than the poor. The poor are in principle incapable of having power, just as they are incapable of having normal money, because the poor do not have a number of qualities necessary for having power. Therefore, when they talk about all this ephemeral power of the people, rest assured, it is all complete nonsense. The people have never had, do not have, and cannot have any power, if we are talking about the people as a whole. Nevertheless, some people who are striving for power or want to hold on to it, actively use this trick, that is, they present themselves as servants of the people in order to persuade more people to their side and thereby come to power. Well, servants of the people, it is not so. It is the people, the servant of the authorities, the servant of the strong, because they obey the authorities and serve them and fear them. The authorities, to the extent of their capabilities and depending on their interests, somehow take care of their people, because they are the source of power for them. The people are the labor force for the authorities, for the elite. Power has always been and will be with the rich. If only because they, and only they will have it, because even if some poor person comes to power, with its help he will definitely start to get rich, or in any case, he will stop being poor. It is clear that not all people need all these palaces and yachts that they can acquire thanks to the power they have, but I assure you, a normal person will not deny himself a quality life. And actually, why should someone play poor, having power, for the sake of what kind of popular favor towards him, if it is already clear that the power, whatever it is, parasitizes on the people, on certain conditions? We feed the power, and the power organizes us, establishes order in society, ensures that the laws are observed, protects this society from threats from the outside, and from chaos and lawlessness within. Servants of the people, as they call themselves, although they have never been and are not, have the right to a decent life. The only question is, against the background of what kind of people's life they will live a decent life. These are the conditions under which we agree to be governed, and these are the conditions under which we are governed. And what conditions do we agree to? We want a well-fed life, our instinct for sustenance demands it. We want to feel safe, because we still have the instinct for self-preservation. We want to own something, because we are owners, and so on down the list. You know very well what people want, what you yourself want. In a more advanced society, such values as freedom of everything and everyone, equality of all people before the law, inviolability of private property, of course, opportunities for self-realization and much more are cultivated, which allows such a society to actively develop and improve. Therefore, when it comes to the well-fed life of some countries, mainly Western countries in the modern world, which they have provided for themselves allegedly by parasitism on other countries, one should pay attention not so much to the emission of the dollar and the military aggression of some of these countries, although this is also certainly important, but to how these countries treat people and what is the price of human life. A lot depends on the attitude of the authorities to their citizens. People want to feel like people, not cattle. Therefore, people, the nation, will love and in every way develop that country, and at the same time defend it, if necessary, which loves, respects and defends them. So, we entrust power to those people, or rather, we want it to be in the hands of those who will make our lives well-fed, safe, fair, equal, interesting, and so on. In general, we want a good life, one in which we have everything we need. Freedom, bread, circuses, money, the people demand it. If the government gives you all this, then what the hell difference does it make to you how rich the people who have this power over you are? What's the point of looking into someone else's wallet when you have something in your own wallet and when your life seems normal and interesting to you, and does not boil down to a struggle for survival? It doesn't matter who has money in this government and how much, as long as they don't forget about the people. But when degenerates and bandits are in power, not only incapable, but also unwilling to do anything for the people, and thinking like rats, only about themselves, because of the atrophy of their social instinct, then the people begin to think about who rules them and how the people who rule them live, how rich they are, and how legitimate they are. No, you must agree, the problem is that the leader has the best of everything and lives a better quality of life than the rest of the tribe, if he is a normal, and what's normal, a good leader who cares about his tribe, who contributes to its survival. But if the leader does not cope with his duties, or does not want to cope with them, if he does not care about the tribe, then what the hell is the point of supporting him? Today, you and I are under the power of such rich people who, for the most part, are absolutely not concerned about the lives of the people, who sometimes cannot even feed them or provide them with security, not to mention anything more. By we, I mean the majority of people around the world, and then decide for yourself how well the government in your country copes or does not cope with its responsibilities. I would not like to single out some countries against the background of others, so as not to offend anyone or praise anyone, because we all have eyes, thanks to which we can see where and why life is good, and where it is bad. However, the impudence of the rich can be explained by their instinct of greed, which they apparently cannot and do not want to curb, as a result of which they behave like animals, like predators who do not know when to stop. Having come to power, a rich or a poor person who is not an idealist and lives exclusively by material values, will certainly grab everything that can be grabbed until he swells or until those at whose expense he grabs destroy him out of despair. This is primitivism, characteristic of a society in which all sorts of rabble comes to power, through coups d'état, through manipulation of public opinion in elections, through their aggressiveness and impudence. In other words, if the people allow themselves to be ruled by anyone, if the people do not care about anything, if the people, as they say, are neither fish nor fowl, then in such a society anyone can come to power, including complete degenerates and scumbags who will come to power with the help of brute force and will use it to hold on to it. Whether this will be the power of one person, or the power of some group of people, as usually happens, is unimportant. What is important is how smart and developed the person or group of people who make decisions is. That is why I believe that the ruling elite must be specially cultivated, that is, educated, because not every group of people can have power, because it is too great a responsibility to place it on just anyone. If you are ruled by scumbags, your life will turn into hell, or God forbid, some dictator who is God knows what is going on in his head will rule you, then nothing good will happen either, because everything will depend on the will of one person. We have all been through this in history, so we must understand what kind of power we should support, and what kind should be kicked out with a pissing broom. When the government engages in social parasitism and indulges this parasitism, and does not create or develop, then such government is dangerous for the society that is under it and that feeds it. After all, such government is comparable to a mad captain who has directed his ship onto the rocks. However, in a weak society, in which the overwhelming majority of people are the same degenerates as the rich people who rule them, and are absolutely passive, then there will simply be no one to stop this captain, no one to resist the mad elite. Consequently, such madness can lead to a social catastrophe, and we have experienced such catastrophes many times in our history. Of course, I understand that we do not always have the opportunity to influence our government, we cannot always choose it and change it when it does not suit us, but if we do not even try to do this, if we always put up with the lawlessness that the representatives of the government commit, then this government will simply smear us like shit on a wall. People must fight for the quality of their lives, and it doesn't matter with whom, with an external enemy or an internal one. The main thing is that people can distinguish good from evil and can resist evil. Money is money. The authorities can have as much of it as they want. If it is a normal government, it deserves to live richly, because it is not easy to manage a crowd, very difficult, and those who do it should be given milk for the harm. But the government must have a human face, not a beast's grin, otherwise it is not a government, a maddened rabble. The rich and the poor, in fact, should not oppose each other. It is contrary to the survival of both. The poor and the rich are people with different functions necessary for the formation of a full-fledged viable society. I myself did not immediately understand this, but only after reading some smart books that formed in me a more or less complete understanding of the structure and development of society. And only after a thorough study of this issue, I finally understood that class differences are the norm, a necessary condition for the survival and development of our species. However, as history and our current reality show, it is very difficult for the rich and the poor to get along with each other, because the rich are not a friend to the poor, since one is well-fed and happy with everything, and the other is hungry and embittered, and has nothing. But with the emergence of the middle class, it became possible to reconcile the poor and the rich, because the people at the bottom saw an opportunity for themselves to get ahead in life. That is, ordinary people saw that they have the opportunity to come to a normal life, that they can theoretically live well, and not mess around in shit all their lives, trying to survive. And it must be said that, in general, there is some progress in this direction. I mean, in some, but unfortunately not in all, countries. Society is stratified in such a way that most people do not feel too infringed in their rights. Yes, people still don't like something. Well, that's not a problem, they always don't like something. But in general, people in some countries, normal from my point of view, live a life that they don't want to lose, and which is not a punishment for them. Such satisfaction of the majority of people with their lives ensures social stability, and along with it economic and political stability, which ultimately allows society to develop, and if you like, to dominate other countries and peoples. And how could it be otherwise? A united and strong family in the form of a united people within one country, which is constantly developing and improving, becoming stronger thanks to this, will naturally dominate savage peoples and use them as slaves, as cannon fodder and in any other capacity, at its discretion. In this world, some nations live well at the expense of other nations that live worse, and the same with people. Some people live well at the expense of other people that live much worse. So for the sake of the common good, the government, represented by rich people, must be able to get along with everyone else, including the poorest people, otherwise there will be discord in such a family, which will make it weak and unable to resist aggression from outside. However, in some countries, the government has long ceased to consider itself, because it is not a part of the people it rules, and therefore behaves quite aggressively and irresponsibly towards these people. This is the problem with the power of rich people. Their power is of such a consumer-aggressive nature. People are considered by such power only as a resource, and not as people. But many representatives of power forget about unity, integrity, common interests, because they do not consider themselves part of a family for which they need to take care. They consider themselves exploiters, to whom fate has given the opportunity to graze cattle and squeeze all the juices out of them. Some of them get into trouble for such an attitude towards the people. But apparently, the degenerate power does not care, including about its own future, not to mention the future of the country and the people under its control. We, ordinary people, normal ordinary people, not degenerates, want to have normal, adequate, educated people around us, with whom it is interesting to live, from whom you can learn something, who develop themselves and help others develop, thus improving the quality of life of the whole society. And if this or that government creates such human conditions of life for us, then it deserves to have power over us, and it deserves to be held by us on our necks. In my opinion, it is wonderful when the government does everything for the development of society, and personally I will only be glad that such a government, which has created all the conditions for a normal life for me, will live richly. I will gladly pay taxes to it, vote for it and defend it, if necessary, because I will know that I am not a piece of shit in the society in which I live, but a citizen who has rights and some freedoms. Please, rule, live in luxury, but let me live too, then I will have no claims against you. In this case, what disagreements can there be between the rich and the poor? And the poor themselves, in this case, will not be many, there will only be not very well-off people, but they always exist, in any society, but there will be no outright poverty that hates itself, its life, other people, and especially the government. And as we can see from the example of some successful countries, it is possible to build a more or less normal society in which the power of the rich will not irritate anyone. But in some places people do not live, but God knows what conditions they survive in, and at the same time they breed like rabbits. They apparently like to live in shit and eat shit, they like it when they are treated like cattle. So our behavior and our way of life, affects the kind of power we have. It is not money that gives people power, and it is not power that gives people money. In fact, some people, and they are the majority, obey money, and by this submission they provide power to other people who have this money. Or, some people obey other people, for one reason or another, and thereby give them power, which then supplies these powerful people with money. Money plays a secondary role in both of these cases. So it is not about money, not about rich or poor people. There will always be rich people in this world, because there will always be poor people in it. The question is only who these rich people will be, people or animals, and who the poor people will be, worms struggling for survival or more or less normal people. Of course, rich people parasitize on the poor, although to be more precise, they exploit the poor, like horses, for example. It is unpleasant when you are exploited, but so far people cannot refuse to exploit each other. For society, any society without exception, must be hierarchical, it must have a division of labor if it wants to develop, and therefore, to one degree or another, each of us will be forced to obey someone in order to ensure stability and some kind of development of the whole society. But it is one thing to obey someone within the framework of human relationships, and quite another to be an outright slave, who is not even considered a human being. So, dear reader, what do you think? Does your government see you as a human being or not, or does it see you as cattle, which the government cynically shears and from time to time uses for meat? You do not even need to think about this question, because you can feel it, on your own skin, first of all. Sometimes it seems to me, although I may be wrong in my feelings, that the authorities in some countries not only do not care about their people, they hate them. Well, when in some countries there is outright robbery of the population, in every possible way, when laws are not observed and crime is flourishing, you can't think anything good about the authorities in such a country, and despite the fact that rich people are in power, it is absolutely obvious that inside they are as poor as church mice. You see, a strong, rich person in his soul, in his head, he does not steal what belongs to him. He develops it, he takes care of it, because it is his asset. If you govern a country and if you are a representative of this country, you cannot help but care about it, if you are a normal, adequate person, because this is your country, you are the power in it, everything in this country belongs to you, because it is under your control, why should you steal from yourself? Well, as a businessman, or more as an entrepreneur lately, since I have narrowed my activities for a number of reasons related to economic problems, I would never steal from my own business. It's just stupid, it's like killing the goose that lays the golden eggs, no more or less normal person would do that. So I think, in those countries where the government is not so much engaged in developing the country as in robbing it, is it really a government, or an imitation of a government? Maybe they were simply appointed to their positions, and like collective farm chairmen, they are concerned with only one thing: how to steal as much as possible home in the time allotted to them? Or the reason could be underdevelopment. When people in power think like this, it's better for us to be the government in an underdeveloped country than to lose it, making the country developed and the people free. It's logical, isn't it, to choose the lesser of two evils? Then it turns out that these are not rich people by nature, but poor people who are trying to grab something while they have the opportunity. The poor are driven by fear, so they eat and eat and eat until they choke. Only fearing for their well-being in the future, people can act so thoughtlessly, or rather deliberately destroy something that does not belong to them. After all, it is stupid to exhaust your own cow by milking it tirelessly. And why not milk someone else's? Let it die, it's not yours. Then it turns out, according to my logic, at least, that the government that does not develop its own country, that does not care about the people of this country, thanks to whom it has this power, without subordinates no power is possible. This is not real power, that is, these people do not have any real power. These are appointed managers who can be replaced, and they know this, so they use the opportunity to grab as much as possible. This is the only way I can explain the barbaric behavior of those in power in some countries. However, there is another explanation: stupidity. Stupid people can saw off the branch they are sitting on. History is full of such examples. For some reason, I think that we are talking about appointees rather than idiots, because people in power, no matter what country, are smarter than most ordinary people, and if they do something, supposedly wrong, incorrectly, stupidly, it means that they do it not so much out of stupidity as out of desire, while following a clear and precise plan. If a person intends to ruin, say, production, he does it. If he intends to ruin agriculture, he ruins it according to plan. And the people scratch their heads and think, how can they be so stupid as to say one thing and do another? Well, the government, well, the stupid people sitting there. And you pay attention not to words, but to deeds, for by their deeds you will know them. And words are just a distraction. But even knowing and understanding everything, the majority of the population is usually a very passive mass, and if the rich start to allow themselves too much, then it does not really resist. True, it is not always possible to have fun, especially in those cases when you can't even buy food and when you can't go outside because of the high crime rate. I think poor people lack the literacy to solve their problems. They don't like to read books, they don't like to think, they don't like to set tasks for themselves and solve them. As long as there is sausage in the refrigerator, people tolerate any abuse, even when they are systematically and consistently destroyed. But as soon as the sausage runs out and people's stomachs begin to swell from hunger, then they somehow begin to resent it, because they have nothing left to lose. The authorities know this. If they are not completely stupid, that is why they always give something, even the bare minimum, but give it to people so that they continue to tolerate it. Any government allows itself to do exactly what the people, or rather the population, allows it to do with itself. True, not every government allows itself such luxury, so as not to spoil society, not to turn this system into a machine of violence, chaos, and lawlessness. After all, one wants to live and rule in a normal house, and not in a zoo. And from the point of view of society, that is, the majority of people, even the poor, having even a lousy government is still better than not having one at all. In most countries of the world, the people are not satisfied with their government, for one reason or another, but they also cannot do without it. Because without power, the people will turn into an uncontrollable beast that will destroy itself. Everyone will fight against everyone, violence, chaos, anarchy will exist until someone brings order and takes control of the situation. that is, until someone establishes power. Thus, no nation will ever be left without power. There will always be someone who will take control of the wild crowd, so there will always be power. The only question is what it will be like. In most cases, one nation or another is ruled by someone who came from that same nation, and they behave with people the way these people deserve. Let's say, savages will not accept any democracy until they stop being savages, because in their understanding, any freedom, any discussions, any self-restraint and refusal of violence is a manifestation of weakness. Yes, no matter what we say, power is a reflection of ourselves, and many of us in the place of power would behave exactly the same way as it behaves, or even worse. To understand this, it is enough to pay attention to those people who, for various reasons, have risen a little in life and began to earn more or less decent money. Don't many of them turn into shit? Just yesterday it was your neighbor, who, like you, lived on a modest salary, and then suddenly, he mastered the buy and sell scheme, resold some junk, earned a little more money than usual, more than an ordinary salary, and already spreads his fingers like a fan, already looks down on you and sometimes does not even want to say hello to you. This is called, the turd has floated a little, and that's it. The rest of the turds are shit for him, and he himself is special. Just imagine how arrogant this piece of shit will be if you bring her to power. I mean bring her, because she will never come to power herself. Imagine how inadequate this piece of shit will become, what a high opinion of herself she will have, and what a low opinion of everyone else. So how is a scumbag from the people better than a rich man in power? One has no opportunity to show his rottenness, the other does. That's the whole difference. Well, I'm not talking about normal people, no matter which ones, rich or poor. In this case, I'm just talking about the difference between the rich and the poor. Because in our country, only bad rich people always end up in power, who are real scoundrels, judging by the opinion of the majority, but the poor, they are supposedly holy, poor people. They supposedly never do anything vile and mean, only light and pure emanates from them. Do you believe in this? Do you believe that only scoundrels are ever in power, and that the common people are holy, and that the poorer the person, the holier? I think that if you are a more or less literate person, you will never think so. Both poor and rich people are the same people, it's just that some can't and others can, do what they want. We all need money, and we want to have power. Another thing is that not every one of us is able to use this power wisely. Not every person has sufficiently developed leadership qualities to manage someone or something. By the way, this is clearly seen in those degenerates who can only steal and destroy everything, and not build and develop, and as soon as such a degenerate gets power over something or someone, he will definitely destroy it and harm a large number of people in every possible way. And I used to be surprised how some freak can manage a plant or manage municipal city passenger transport, for example, until I learned that behind such individuals there is usually a criminal element, which, due to its gopnik inclinations, is incapable of creation in principle. But it is capable of taking away and holding property through violence. So it turns out that when some manager, being incompetent, or even worse a saboteur, manages something, then his power is based on those bandits whom he feeds, ruining, like, his enterprise, company, plant. The same thing happens with countries. Behind this or that manager in this or that country, there may be some force that profits from this country, in all possible ways, thanks to this manager, completely controlled by it, whose power is greatly limited. At the same time, this manager himself can live quite richly. For him it is only important to obey his bosses, well, and to powder the brains of the hungry and embittered people, or to intimidate them. Read the book by John Perkins, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. In it, in my opinion, you can find a lot of interesting information for reflection. When we talk about the power of the rich, many of us, focus more on the material goods that a person with power has and multiplies with its help. But not many people think about the ideological values and goals of those who came to power or already have it. But both before and now there were and are people for whom power is not only a way to make money and an opportunity to parasitize on other people, but also a way to implement some great idea. And such people exist, and they implement their ideas, having a certain power. Nevertheless, many people, both rich and poor, do not understand at all why live by some ideas, something unreal, something imaginary, and even make huge efforts to implement this imaginary thing. For them, eating, sleeping, taking a shit, getting laid when drunk, going crazy from fat, these are all things that are really worth living for, but to implement something great, spiritual, ideological, for them, this is something beyond their understanding. I will not explain to you now why this happens, I will only say that people with ideas, they really change the world, and from my observations, they change it mainly for the better. Yes, there were such individuals in our history whose idealism boiled down to some completely insane desire to radically change the world and the existing order of things in it, in the most unimaginable way. And this was done barbarically, fanatically, abruptly, because of which some nations drowned in blood. Well, what can I say here? Ideas are different, the people from whom they come are also different. So all these stomachs that only drink and eat at the people's expense are also different, and they can cause no less trouble. What is corruption worth alone, the consequences of which can be truly terrible not only for some individual people, but for the entire country? This is also evil, and not a small one. In general, my opinion is this: power should be in the hands of competent people, driven not only by the stomach, but also by the head and heart, and such people should not be taken from the common people, but specially brought up from early childhood. Power belongs to the elite, clans, or whatever they call themselves, and this elite of power should be raised in such a way as to represent people truly worthy of power, and not beast-like freaks, barbarians, savages plundering everything and everyone. Read the novel by Hermann Hesse, The Glass Bead Game. This is a wonderful book, in my opinion. It will show you an example of how to raise intellectuals who can be trusted with serious matters, for example, power over people. As for the wealth that people in power possess, this is one of the attributes of power, as natural as, for example, the same violence, without which power cannot do. Power must be rich, otherwise it is not power. We do not need the people who rule us to be poor, we need them to perform their duties properly and provide us with a well-fed and peaceful life, as our basic instincts demand. Decent people should have a decent life, it's normal, it's fair. But when all sorts of impudent freaks live fat at the expense of the people, without doing anything useful for them, without even fulfilling their direct duties, that's bad, very bad. This is no longer power, these are not managers, these are parasites and wreckers who corrupt and destroy the society on which they parasitize. The power of the rich is both the power of people worthy of it, and the power of degenerates, barbarians, cattle, thieves-in-law, gopniks, who in principle can do nothing useful for society. And money has absolutely nothing to do with it, it's all about us, about our attitude to this or that power.